Yep, that Jesus was sent. The world's going to know. So get this. People's eternity hinges on our unity. I don't know if you've let that truth capture you before, but people's eternity hinges on faith in Jesus and our unity as Christ followers. So I think we should read that prayer before we start our services on Sunday mornings. I think we should read that prayer before we start our committee meetings and we start discussing things that we might disagree with. I think we should read that before we start a small group gathering where we have an opportunity to go out and serve. I think we should read that prayer every morning and every night. I think we should read that prayer before we get upset about something that happened at church that we get frustrated over. I don't like the color of the carpet that was chosen. They painted the wall that color. Can you believe they painted that wall? I think we should read Jesus' prayer and remember that our unity is eternally important. And it's usually way more important than stuff we get all bent out of shape about. I want you to listen to how the Apostle Paul expounds on Jesus' prayer in Ephesians chapter 4. So in Ephesians chapter 4, starting in verse 1, it says this. It says, "Therefore, I, a prisoner for serving the Lord, beg you to lead a life worthy of your calling, for you have been called by God. Always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Make every effort to keep yourselves united in the Spirit, binding yourselves together with peace. For there is, how many bodies? There's one body and one Spirit, just as you've been called to one glorious hope for the future. There is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and one God and Father who is over all and in all and living through all." So we've been called to unity because we are one church family, locally and globally. So I'm going to ask some rhetorical questions now from you. So just some stuff I want you to think about based upon this passage here. So the first question is this. Do you know that you've been called by God? Do you understand that? There's a whole lot of people out there wondering when God is going to call them. And I'm here to tell you this morning, He's called. He's called you. He's called you to this community. He's called you to this church. He's called you to your family. He's called you to your job. He's called you to live with passion and purpose for Him. So how are you doing at that? How are you doing at fulfilling your calling? How are you doing at shining a light wherever you are for Jesus? It's what you've been called by God to do. Then you've been called to be humble and gentle as you fulfill your mission. So how are you doing at that? Are you humbly and gently living your faith and sharing your faith? And the reason I say that, and I think the reason Paul says that, is because sometimes Christ followers are not all that humble, and we're not all that gentle. Sometimes we're actually arrogant and demeaning. And if you haven't been around any Christ followers like that lately, go onto social media. You'll probably stumble on a few that are out there. Pick any hot topic that our culture is arguing about today and look through the thread. And I'm sure you'll find a Christ follower somewhere in there that's not behaving like a Christ follower. They're not being humble. They're not being gentle. And I'm certain that this kind of stuff doesn't happen here. But some of the most argumentative places in the world are church meetings. One of the reasons I never wanted to be a pastor was I grew up around the church. My dad was a elder in many of the churches we were a part of. And I saw a lot of stuff, and I'm like, no thanks. Nah, I'd rather not really be involved in that. Because sometimes Christ followers can be some of the meanest people. Say some of the most hurtful things. Here we come in, we worship a God of love, and then we interact with each other with hearts filled with hate. Like, that's not right. That's not okay. We got to fix that. We got to fix that by it starting here, by us being humble and gentle with people inside the church and people outside the church. But God tells us then to be patient with each other and make allowance for each other's faults. Now, I'm not sure where Paul got this one, because sometimes this is a really hard thing for me, and I don't know if it's really hard for you. But I don't know sometimes if God understands how many faults people around us have. Like, there's a lot of faults that other people have, and I like to tell God that on a regular basis. Like, did you see how they were driving? I mean, did you see that? Like, that was horrible. And then God often likes to remind me that this is a two-way street, that it goes two ways. So not long ago, I was driving in town, and I pulled up at a stoplight behind somebody else. And as I looked at them through their back mirror, I could tell they were looking down. And I didn't know if they were looking at their phone, what they were looking at. But I thought, I hope they look up when the light turns green, because, I don't want to sit here all day. And the light turned green, and they didn't go. And they didn't go. And they didn't go. And I waited, beyond the customary 3 seconds before I honked my horn. I like 4 seconds I gave them, and I felt like I was being very generous. 4 seconds later, I lay on the horn. Not the beep beep, but the hey, wake up. It's time to go. They looked up. Oh, sorry. Zipped off. So I sped up to the next light, a little bit irritated through that encounter. Got to the next light, and I've got some notepads in my truck that I carry around with me all the time in case I need to write something down. I stick it on my dash. It reminds me. If I don't see it, I don't know I have to do it, so I write it down, stick it on my dash. I got Post-it notes all over. So I'm driving up to the next light, and I think about this thing I got to capture in my mind. So I look down, and I start writing, and I get lost in this note, in this thought, and I look up, and I see the light turn yellow. I look in my rearview mirror, and there's a car behind me. It's thankfully not the same car, but there's another car behind me, and it turned red, and I missed it. We sat through the whole light. And I realized in that moment that this verse goes two ways. And I gave the wave of shame in my mirror as I looked at that person. Thank you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You extended grace to me when I didn't extend grace to somebody else. And I was convicted in that moment of we have got to make allowance for each other's faults. So how are you doing at that? How are you doing at making allowance for other people's faults? The person sitting next to you has faults. They know it. You know it. How are you doing at extending grace to them? Guess what? You have faults. Don't ask them how they're doing at extending grace to you. That might create an interesting conversation. But we've got to be patient with other people. We've got to learn to pour out grace for others. Then we're supposed to make every effort to keep united and bonded together because of our love. So, are you doing everything you can to keep united here at Coastal? Are you doing everything you can to stay united in the team that maybe you serve on? Or the small group that maybe you're a part of? Are you doing everything you can to work out any conflicts that might arise or as they arise? Are you doing everything you can to keep united with other Christ followers in our community, other churches in our community? Are you doing everything you can at home, at work, at school to stay united as best you can? Now, we can't, do everything for everybody else. It's always a two-way street. There's other things that other people have to do in having a good relationship with us. But are you doing everything you can to live at peace with other people? I'm always amazed as a pastor at the number of people who claim to be Christ followers who don't think they have to resolve conflict with other people. It makes me so sad. Where somebody will say, but you don't know what they did to me. Like, well, yeah, I know what we all did to Jesus. So, he forgave us, so we're called to forgive other people. I think sometimes we forget that people's eternity hinges on our unity. It hinges on putting their faith in Jesus. But again, part of the attractant of people being attracted to Christianity is Christ followers who behave like Christ. Imagine that we should behave like Jesus as we interact with people inside the church and people outside the church. So, do you have any conflicts that you need to resolve? Whether that's in this room, or that's at work, or that's at home, Or maybe that's a phone call that you need to make later today. Don't ignore it. Don't excuse it. Resolve it. People's eternity hinges on our unity. I think our world is starving for Christians in churches who are welcoming, loving, and unified. I think our world is starving for churches where people who should hate each other, like tax collectors and zealots, like maybe Republicans and Democrats, maybe people from up north and people from down south, like that, or Boston. So I think our world is starving. You know, you live here in Flagler County. You live specifically here in Flagler Beach. This is the place where your church is. There's citizens here in Flagler Beach that are starving to walk into these doors and to see people who they would say, I can't believe they're here. I can't believe they like each other. They should all hate each other. And then observe genuine love in this group, in every church that we have in our community. May we be those kind of Christians. May we be those kind of churches. So Jesus prayed in John 17:21, I pray that they will all be one, just as you and I are one, as you are in me, Father, and I am in you. May they be in us so that the world will believe you sent me. I say, let's work together every day to answer Jesus' prayer. Coastal, thanks for letting me come today. It's been a real privilege to be here with you. It's an honor to serve our great God alongside of you. So would you pray with me? Lord, I do thank you so much for what's happening all around our community today. Lord, we've got this pulpit swap thing going on, this one church event, where we are wanting to communicate to, Lord, our church families and to our community and remind each of us that we really are one church serving one God with one purpose. Oh, Lord, I just pray that we would be the Christians that would fight against territorialism, that would fight against jealousy and competitiveness, that would remember on a regular basis that we should live with passion and purpose for you, that we're all working together, that we should all be working together to win as many people around us into a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. That's the only thing that matters for all of eternity. Lord, I pray that our hearts would be locked onto that, and we would live the rest of our days, Lord, until you come, either until you call us home or until, Jesus, you step out of those 1 Thessalonians 4 clouds and say, it's time, gang. It's finished. So, Lord, may we be focused on the race that you've set before us and the unity that you've asked us to have. In Jesus' powerful name we pray this. Amen. Thanks, you guys.